Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today for this session, which is sure to be very, very riveting for all of us. We are joined today by Ms. Durga Shakti Nagpal, IAS, who is the Deputy Secretary, the Department of Commerce, Government of India. And she's here to deliver a lecture on last mile delivery and accountability. I request Shyam sir to please introduce Ms. Nagpal to everybody present. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shivans. It's really my privilege to introduce Ms. Nagpal to this audience. It's quite a dramatic sequence of events that has happened, starting with her article, a very good, very nice article on monitoring of public programs that she published, and I think it's Indian Express, if I'm correct, print and then Indian Express. And then one of the students of my M&E class forwarded me, and then I had an idea that, okay, why not connect with her and see if she can kind of deliver a lecture to our students. So idea was for M&E class, but then later we expanded. I said everybody should get benefited from her experience. She's a very dynamic officer. I'm sure many of us have heard or read her very, in the early in her year, 1 or 2 year, when she actually laid a crackdown on illegal mining in Noida. And I still remember those news items that I read. And she was very dynamic, stood against the pressure from various stakeholders. I'm using all these stakeholders because there were multiple actors there. And then, she overcome, and we all know she as a very dynamic officer. She has been with, the district I come from, Kanpur. She was SDM there, then she was in Mathura, and now she is holding a position of a Deputy Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry. She is also a Deputy CEO of a foundation that the ministry has established. I'm sure that including students and all of us, and I have also invited some colleagues from the Evaluation Committee of India. I'm sure some of them are here for this lecture, and I'm sure we'll get benefited from her insights, for practical knowledge, which is maybe pretty much different what we teach in the class. And it's going to be the benefit that we are going to get today. So I really thank Ms. Nagpal to accept my request and be here with us. Thank you very much. Shivans.
Thank you, sir. I request Ms. Nagpal to please take over. Ma'am, thank you so much for joining us today. We're honored to have you here with us.
Thank you very much, Shivansh, and my gratitude and compliments to Professor Shyam Singh for having me over today. It may be a virtual interaction, but it is always very nice to interact with the college students, and you find reasons to feel young and to feel that yes, you were a student and perhaps you can always be a student for your life. When I was in my college, I always wanted to get out of college and start working. And the day I started working, I wanted to get back in college. So it's nice to meet college students today. And a very warm evening to all of you, to all the guests, to the students and faculty members. I've been told that you have upcoming exams from the 10th of this month. And like Shivansh, he used the word riveting. So I hope I can make this lecture a bit riveting. To bring you out of your monotony of your academic exercise. There are just some thoughts and personal experiences that I've had in my 1 decade of service, not a very long time, but I've entered that 10th year mark. So I can safely say that I've been in the service for a decade now. With these opening thoughts, there is a small PPT that I have jotted. We can start with that, please.
Okay.
Shivansh, if you could open, yeah. Thank you. So as you all are aware, the topic of our discussion today is last mile delivery and accountability. Next slide, please. I've broken it into two parts. First part is last mile delivery, and the second part is accountability. So I perceive last mile in a very different way. I mean, I feel that the last is actually when you perceive, when the word last mile or the very first word last comes to your mind, you should perceive it as first. So here, even though we may be writing last, but our mind and our brain should register it as first. That's because when we talk about last mile, we talk about that person who's standing on the very last edge, the last man. There is, a phrase in Hindi. For the Hindi speaking students, they would be able to appreciate कि हम बचपन में अक्सर हमने सुना है अंतिम छोर पे खड़ा वो आखिरी इंसान. So it is that last man, that neglected and marginalized person, or maybe you could imagine a child who has missed consecutive 2 meals, his hunger pang. That beneficiary, that person should be thought of reaching out to first. And that is how, I like to phrase this also as a journey of reverse execution, wherein you are starting from the end and then reaching out to those who are comparatively well off. There's an example that I would like to quickly narrate here. You would have heard of this scheme of the government called Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana. So it's a long name, but to cut it short, it's a scheme that intends to bring electricity to villages. And the government had set it was a very ambitious scheme when the government heralded it, and they set a target of electrifying 18,000 plus, close to 18,500 villages in a time span of 1,000 days, which is slightly less than 3 years. And how the journey of reverse execution was started was that they hired young electrical engineers from villages which were hardest to reach out. Those villages having thick, dense forest, having very hilly terrains, mountainous regions, difficult to access. These villages which had been deprived of electricity for centuries, they were identified first. The electrical engineers were hired from those very particular villages who could understand the nuances of that particular area, and they were given small handheld devices with this app called GARV downloaded in that. GARV is Gramin Vidyutikaran, that is rural electrification app. So these young boys and girls were given charge of 5 to 10 villages that they had to cover in a span of 7 days, that is in a week. And they were given the task of reaching out to the villagers, going to the places where the electrical poles had to be erected or were supposedly erected, take their pictures, update their status in terms of their maintenance levels, how they were functioning, whether there was any problem or not. So this pan-India data was collected by means of this app, and starting from those villages which had been deprived of electricity since perhaps their inception. And this data was monitored at the national level, which was then used to troubleshoot the problems and to quickly provide solutions, targeted solutions to the specific villages. And this particular scheme has been applauded all across, especially internationally, of being one of the greatest movements in terms of bringing the most fundamental necessity to the rural people, to the villagers. Next slide, please. The other part of our discussion today, accountability. Now, accountability is a very common term. We use it in different contexts. The traditional meaning that we all are familiar with is that it is a tool to fix mistakes, to fix lapses and failures, and perhaps to fix answerability for omissions and commissions. But the modern day perception of accountability is changing very fast. It's now more being seen as a tool to bring in speed, efficiency, and quality. When we talk about speed, we of course talk about adherence to timelines, because if a government policy, no matter how noble in its intention it may be, if it is not implemented in a particular time span, it is a complete waste. Similarly, when we talk about efficiency, we discuss how best the resources are put to use. And when we talk about quality, we talk about the impact, the outcome, or in general, the effectiveness that the policy or the program has brought about. Why this change of definition or this shift in the definition of accountability has taken place? I feel the most important reason that could be attributed is that the common man now is being seen more and more at the very fulcrum, the very center of all governance, which was perhaps not so much in times previous to the present context. Professor Shyam Singh mentioned about this monitoring trust that I wrote in my article, and I thought that I should share it with you. Basically, it's a flow of accountability, and it is something which should be inbuilt in all policies and programs. There are two essential features which I feel should be a part of it. Firstly, it should be manned by experts of not only administration, but also from legal and financial side, and more importantly, from the civil society. And the second essential feature that it should have is that it should be in a dynamic way, in a real-time fashion, keep a check on the execution, on the implementation of the particular program or policy, whether the last mile delivery is happening first or not. If it is happening, then it should be replicated at much more speed. And if it is not happening, then why is it not happening? And what is the corrective action that needs to be taken? Usually what happens is that when a government policy is implemented over a period of time, then the question of accountability comes. Then the question of audit comes. Unfortunately, we are not fixing accountability from day one. So that is the task which the monitoring trust should be assigned. Next slide, please. So some personal experiences that I would be sharing with you. These are the four. The first is sand mafia, which was briefly mentioned by Professor Shyam Singh. The second is my experience of government schools in Kanpur. Then I would be talking about rural toilets, my experience from Mathura. And the last is my most, it's an experience which is dearest to me. So that is also from Mathura. I would be talking about that towards the end. Next slide, please. The first is my experience with the sand mafia. So this was my very first posting. I had just finished my training days and I was posted as SDM in Noida. Now, those of you who come from the NCR region would be familiar with the fact that Noida has such a topography that it is on the floodplains of River Yamuna. And the River Yamuna brings in rich silt and sand every time that the waters come down. Unfortunately, because Noida is, so ripe in terms of construction activity, there is a lot of construction activity going on, whether it is educational institutions or residential or commercial buildings. Sand is a commodity which is in requirement throughout the year. It's a precious commodity and it's always in very high prices. The demand is much more and the supply is less. So naturally, the area which is already rich in silt and sand becomes prone to illegal sand mining. And that is exactly what was happening in Noida when I was posted there. There was so much of illegal dredging of sand that it was difficult to imagine that during the day the city was completely different. It used to be a hub of development, and at night it used to become absolutely surrounded by sand mafia of the highest order. So now this particular illegal dredging of sand that happened impacted not only the environment, because it made the river course change and made the whole area much more prone to floods, threatening life and property on one hand, and at the same time it was causing a loss of a lot of money to the government treasury, because when you auction land for a legal sand mining, the government gets money, but when it is being done illegally, then government loses that money, which in turn is used for development. So these raids that we organized, we planned them, we surveyed the whole area, because we didn't want to just create a small fury. We first understood what are the hotbeds where the illegal mining takes place, what are the routes through which the vehicles, the trucks that are laden with sand move and exit the city, and what is the nexus with administration, with police, with the political machinery. That nexus is something that is very difficult to crack, but that is the most important thing that needs to be nailed down. So as against the sand mafia, which was very well equipped, they used to have the highest end SUVs, and they used to be armed, and they had the most sophisticated equipments, the Doppler machines, the JCBs. We, if you look at administration, we were very small in number, and our vehicles were also very old-fashioned and absolutely obsolete. I remember as an SDM, I was given a Sumo. Perhaps the students will not be able to visualize, because Sumo is a vehicle which is not so much in use these days. But my Sumo would never go at more than 40 kilometers per hour speed. And it used to be so difficult to chase these sand mafia because they were equipped, like I said, they had the best of vehicles. So we had limited manpower. We were resource constrained in terms of vehicles, in terms of people, in terms of everything. So what we did was we thought that, at least we should be strong on our planning. And that's how, we targeted the hotbeds first. And gradually our rates started picking up. And they became so effective that, to cut the story short, in a span of just 3 weeks' time, we dismantled so many bridges that the sand mafia had made to transport their trucks. We seized a huge number of equipments. I remember we registered about 90 plus FIRs. We arrested about 100 people, and we were able to collect royalty worth about 80 crores. And this was all in less than 3 weeks' time. So it was a small campaign, but what I'm trying to say is that it turned into a national movement. Perhaps Noida had that advantage of being close to the NCR. You get that media hype very easily. But having said that, the National Green Tribunal stepped in, and they issued very strict advisories that all illegal mining happening not only in Noida, but all across the country has to be stopped. So the administration came down heavily. We took one small initiative in one area of the country, and the impact that it created, it resonated so much that there was, illegal mining coming down all across the country. So that was my bit of sand mafia experience. Next slide, please. Yes. So this is when I was posted in Kanpur. And I observed, like you would be familiar, that the schools in rural areas are two kinds, primary and secondary. So primary is till class 5 and secondary is from 6th to class 12th. So I observed that there was very good enrollment levels of schools. So for every class, there was at least 30 students who were registered. But the students attending the class, that is coming to the class, was very less. So perhaps only 3 or 4 or 5. This particular thing reminds me to go tangentially and see that there's very good attendance level of our session today. And I really appreciate the fact. I was a little concerned whether, this is slightly odd time and you have your exams coming, but I'm very happy that many of you are here and, enthusiastically attending our so-called lecture today. So the attendance levels in schools was very less. It was only about 3 or 4 or 5 children per class, as against an enrollment of 30 students per class. So we tried to understand as to why the parents are not sending their children to school. And the chief complaint that came up was that there is teacher absenteeism. And apparently there is no forum for the parents to tell the education department that, look, the teachers are not coming, because you have to imagine a rural scenario wherein the parents themselves are not educated. Who would they reach out to? And there was also this concept of proxy teachers. Now, what teachers used to do was they used to not attend schools. They used to assign proxy people to go and deliver classes and, pay a part of their salary to those teachers. So it was a very tragic, very unfortunate situation. What we tried to do was that we devised a system wherein we rewarded those deserving teachers who were very diligent in terms of regularly attending classes, taking lectures, and those teachers whose students were performing well. So we started rewarding those teachers also. This concept was not there earlier, to reward the teacher whose students were doing well. And at the same time, we came down heavily on those teachers who were running this proxy model. And another thing that we did was that we appointed parents as vigilants, those parents who were willing to come forward. They used to make surprise visits to schools, and they used to inform us that on this particular day, this teacher is absent. So this was like an indirect check, which was there with us all the time. We did not use our resources in that, but it was a very valuable check available to us. And another thing that I redesigned was the concept of midday meal. I like to call it golden glow, because I feel that it is something which is incredible in terms of increasing the attendance levels of children. But unfortunately, what was happening was that the children were not liking the food that was being cooked. So we analyzed the whole cycle, from the raw material, the food ingredients that were being used, the cooking time, the taste, the menu, and what was being done to the leftover food in terms of the wastage and disposal. One thing that I did was that, a mother knows best what his or her what her child loves to eat. So we appointed a small group of parents, of mothers particularly, who came to school and taught the lady who used to cook that this is how you should prepare food. There was a set menu, but the way it was cooked is what made the whole difference. And the result was that there was a huge improvement in not only the attendance levels, but to our pride, to the retention and academic levels, because that is the ultimate goal. When we talk about accountability, it is not just data and number, how many students registered, how many attended. No, it is how many students actually obtained the learnings that is being imparted to them. I feel that accountability should be perceived in this manner. When we talk about last mile delivery, it is not about the number of students who are coming and sitting in the class. It is about how well they are performing, whether they are retaining what they are being taught, whether it is actually making any valuable difference to their wholesome development. A recent initiative which is being taken by Delhi government is that they have decided to distribute dry ration kits to the parents now that the schools are closed because of the COVID. So they don't want the children to be deprived of this particular food, because it is very high on nutrition. So what they've decided is that they have invited parents to collect the dry ration kits on behalf of the students. And this is going to be in continuation till the schools don't open. So what my conclusion here is that providing nutritious food to children is a big goal in itself. But if somehow we can make that food, nutritious food can be made delicious, then it is something that will flow like a journey. It will be enjoyed by the person cooking, by the child eating, by the parent who is sending his or her child to school, by the teacher, and by the whole system as a whole. There's another initiative related to education, which I'm taking at my own individual level and which I'll quickly talk about, is that this is at my own personal level. There is no forum as of now for an outsider, like for you, me, or anybody, to donate to a government school. You could donate your old furniture, which you no longer need, but it could be of good use to students. You could donate your computer, your desktop. Maybe you have a football in a good condition. It could be a table, a chair, a lamp, anything. Or you could donate cash. For instance, you want to donate 10% of your salary. Or for that matter, there are young people who want to, donate time. They want to go and mentor children. They want to, share their experiences, some lessons that they have learned during their childhood, which are, very valuable as they have grown. So this is a portal which I'm trying to create, wherein I would be bringing all the schools, be it schools or colleges, but government for the time being, on one portal. The principal would be able to tell what are her requirements in terms of, cash or kind, or whether her students are wanting to obtain mentoring lectures from you. And it would be available for you to reach out to the students directly. So it is like bringing all the government schools on a single map for the country as a whole. And for instance, some of you may actually go abroad, may find jobs abroad, and may want to, get back in touch with your alumni school. You may have passed out from a government school, or you may not have passed out from a government school, but you still want to give back to society. So there is no forum as such, and this is what this particular portal is going to do. It is going to connect anybody sitting anywhere in the world with our government schools and their children. Next slide, please. This is my experience from Mathura. Now, like I said, accountability is more seen as a matter of numbers. So now Mathura was doing good in terms of the number of toilets being constructed. You would be aware of the scheme of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, wherein the government intends to have toilets constructed in each and every rural household. And needless to say, the toilets are health promoting, they are socially empowering, and they reduce crimes. Now in Mathura, what was happening was that there was no dearth of toilets. There was a good number of, toilets being constructed. But to the irony of everybody, these toilets were not being used. And it was very strange when we tried to understand as to why they are not using the toilets. The reason that they came up with was that, they feel that these particular toilets pollute the groundwater. And the groundwater table is once polluted, becomes unfit for drinking water purposes. So this is something which had been so deeply ingrained in their psyche that no matter how hard we would, try and explain them that no, look, these toilets are scientific, they have 2 particular, compartments, there is no way of the groundwater getting polluted, they just wouldn't understand. And that is how the role of civil society was brought in. We appointed rural motivators. In Hindi, we call them preraks. Preraks means somebody who can impart inspiration or motivation. So, they could be teachers from the villages, some retired clerks, or for that matter, any senior aged man or woman who was revered or respected in the village. The village social structure is very different. Over there are certain people who are respected largely by one and all. So we appointed them as rural motivators, and it is through them we communicated to the villagers that these toilets are not only environment friendly, but they are also health promoting. Gradually, we were able to win their support, and the result was that Mathura, of course, had sufficient number of toilets, but it became open defecation free. And we all are aware that this toilet building program of the government has been heralded as one of the biggest women empowerment movements in the world. So just to repeat what I said in the beginning, that accountability here was not the number of toilets. It was the number of people who were using the toilets, the resultant diseases that were not happening, the money that was saved, which would have otherwise been spent had they been having those hygiene related problems, especially the women, and the medicines and the money that they would have had to incur. So accountability is a journey. It keeps coming back to you, and that's the way it should be. In fact, sometimes I also feel that, accountability has been seen as an external concept. Why should we be told that, look, you have to get so many number of toilets made, or you have to ensure that the toilets are being used? It is something that you as when you are implementing. It is not necessarily in the act of governance only. In any profession that you may be in times to come, it is something that should come naturally and genuinely to you. Whether you are doing justice to what you are doing, whether that benefit is actually reaching to the intended beneficiary, or it is just touching and coming back, whether he is able to own it up or not, is what the question is. Next slide, please. This is my last and perhaps the most interesting one. It is the shortest one also. So I was posted in Mathura again, and we were given a target of sowing 10 lakh saplings in 7 days. And Mathura is a very comparatively water deprived district in terms of it gets very little rain. The groundwater level is also very low. So the target of 10 lakh in itself was very ambitious. But we revised the target and said that we will demonstrate a much higher target. We set a target of 25 lakh plants to be sown in 7 days. And at that time, Narega supported sowing of saplings in your own field. So for instance, if you are a farmer, you can sow saplings in your own field and actually be given labor wages for that. You will be given free sapling and you will be given wages for sowing those saplings. But we had several challenges ahead of us. So the first thing was the shortage of saplings. To arrange 25 lakh saplings all of a sudden was very difficult. And how do you store them? I mean, it is not as if one go down in which you can keep. You have to have a continuous supply of saplings. And once sown, their aftercare was very important in terms of manuring, watering. And for instance, if the saplings don't survive, then you have to replace them. So of course, we converged with the forest department, with several other agencies, and we made sure that we made sure that we make provision for their survival, not for their sowing. Now here is again the concept of accountability. How many saplings did you sow would be the traditional definition of accountability. But how many saplings actually happily survive is the modern day definition of accountability. There was one thing which I did, and I received a lot of flack for it in the beginning, but I guess people got used to it subsequently. The Gram Pradhans would come up to me during this 7-day journey of ours of rapidly sowing. We were literally in a rapid fire mode, sowing saplings from one village to another. We had huge teams and we had targets set for each day. So this Gram Pradhans came to my office and said that we want you to sow the first sapling of so many number of villages. So it's like Udghatan, it's like an inauguration, that you come and sow the first sapling, and it's seen as a good gesture that a senior official has come and now people are to accomplish the target of sowing the remaining saplings. So I said that no, I gave it a thought, and I said no, I will not come for the first sapling. I will come for the last sapling. And here again, I come to my very first slide where I say the last is the first. The reason why I chose to go and plant the last sapling was because I wanted to make sure that all the remaining saplings, minus that last one, have been sown and proper arrangements have been made for their care, for their watering, for their manuring. And a traditional survival rate of any afforestation drive is not more than 45%. But by planning the whole exercise, it was a matter of huge pride for my team and me, of course, that we achieved a survival rate of 80%. Not only did we have a 2.5 times higher target, but we had a higher survival rate also. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So just to sum up quickly what the title today, that is last mile delivery and accountability, what are the key requirements of our discussion today? Think and plan well in advance. Planning in advance is always very helpful. It may cost you time in the beginning, but in the long run, it saves a lot of time. It saves a lot of time and saves a lot of resources by preempting those problems which could have otherwise occurred in the absence of proper planning. Avail expertise and local inputs at initial stage. Again, very important. Talking to the people at the ground level is very important. It is they who tell us as to what is their genuine requirement, what are their problems. Don't wait, be proactive. Regularly check and nudge your comfort zone. Ask questions, keep talking to stakeholders. Here, civil society is extremely crucial because they are like a bridge between you and the people. Visit ground zero. It also helps to keep your team motivated and charged up. Regular feedback is very important, and systematic monitoring and follow-up. Now, all these things go parallelly. It is not that, planning will just happen once and in the beginning, or that we will avail expertise opinion only once, or we will obtain feedback towards the end of implementation. It is something that flows like a circle. We will have to continuously do this if we want to ensure last mile delivery. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the second last slide. A German philosopher, his quote says, "The trouble with routine is that it only gets worse." So dear friends, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Be one step ahead. Take the initiative and make things better. Build teams and let your conviction flow. I think conviction is most important. If you are strong in terms of your conviction, automatically you will find support from your seniors, from your colleagues, from your subordinates, and your whole, the assignment that you have been given, it will not seem like a work to you. It will seem like something that you love doing. There's a lecture which I delivered, and my topic was, in this context, it reminds me to quickly tell you about it. My topic was that there is no concept called hard work. I feel this word hard work is a misnomer. There is no such thing in this world called hard work, because the moment you start loving what you're doing, the moment you start feeling so strong about it in terms of your conviction, that hard and that work, both the things disappear. It just becomes like your journey, an enjoyable journey. So even though you may be working for someone, or you may be getting salary for someone for doing that work, which may be requiring you to put in a lot of hard work in the perception of others, but for you, it is going to be a journey which you are going to enjoy because you feel so strongly about it. The next slide, please. It is a short video. It's a very, very old video. Shivans, just a moment before you start. I want background of this video. It's a very old video of young students who are trying to do something. It's a little blurred, but what I have done is that I have added the subtitles below. So please do read the subtitles as the video plays. And it has a very simple and at the same time a deep message behind it, linking with our overall discussion today. And I hope you enjoy it. Please go ahead, Shivansh.
सर आपके लिए उस पार कार का इंतजाम किया है सर आइए सर चल चल
I hate this country.
तुम चलो तो हिंदुस्तान चले, तुम चलो तो हिंदुस्तान चले, तुम चलो तो हिंदुस्तान चले, तुम चलो तो हिंदुस्तान चले। लगा हाथ के सूरज सुबह निकाला करे, हथेलियों में भरे धूप और उछाल करे। ओ लगा हाथ के सूरज सुबह निकाला करे, हथेलियों में भरे धूप और उछाल करे। उफक पे पाँव रखो और चलो अकड़ के चलो, उफक पे पाँव रखो और चलो पकड़ के चलो, फलक पकड़ के उठो और हवा पकड़ के चलो, फलक पकड़ के उठो और हवा पकड़ के चलो। तुम चलो तो हिंदुस्तान चले, तुम चलो तो हिंदुस्तान चले, हिंदुस्तान चले।
Ma'am.
Yes, please. So
Professor
basically,
Shyam?
the video is just about this young boy who decides to lift the tree, and everybody else is just worried about, finding their own path. And it is he who decides with his own little hands to lift the tree, and then everybody joins him. And that's how the whole message is shown, that you take the initiative and everybody joins you. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, if with your permission, can we take some questions, please, ma'am?
Yeah, sure, we
From
can
the
do that.
participants. So if anybody has any questions, please, I request you to please key them in the chat box. I shall take it up with ma'am, and then we can go ahead with that.
Shivansh, can I ask a question?
Of course, sir, please.
Okay. Yeah, Ms. Nagpal, thanks for this lecture, particularly sharing your own experience. And of course, I compliment you on all these achievements and innovations, and they are very much needed. But of course, as we understand, maybe at a general level, there may be one Nagpal here, one Nagpal there. At a larger level, particularly when it comes to bureaucracy or officialdom. So the accountability that you mentioned, what is the kind of accountability that system tries to ensure for the bureaucracy especially? Apparently, there is no downward accountability. What they have is upward accountability. So this downward accountability, which generally would be missing, is what leads to that gap in reaching that last mile that you were rightly mentioning. So therefore, there have been several attempts to make bureaucracy become accountable, right? In a very holistic sense. But that has not happened, right? So the bureaucracy, the way it has evolved, it has worked, still largely remains the same. Though now and then, maybe in some programs or maybe in some particular districts, so we see some innovative efforts, but at a larger level, so this bane of upward accountability of bureaucracy vis-a-vis downward accountability is what is the reason, in my view, for many of the problems that we face. That's my first question. Second question is, again, particularly when it comes to bureaucracy, IAS and IPS, right? Yeah, so because the way the kind of accountability that works there, whenever any kind of a problem or a crisis comes up, right? For example, recently we have all witnessed what happened in Hathras, right? Not even one IAS or IPS officer stood up. Though recently some 105 IAS officers, retired IAS officers and civil service officers gave representation state against an act, recent act of religious conversion, etc. But when it comes to really responding when there is a crisis, when they are in service, why don't they show any autonomy or agency, even a minimum of that? So they always would like to show their upward accountability, especially towards the political bosses. Yeah, these are my two questions. Yeah, if you could respond. Yeah, again, thanks for your nice lecture. I really liked it, and especially your effort in the sand mine incidents.
Thank you very much, sir, for your observation and for your questions. I think it's may not be appropriate to term what you have said as questions. They are the core, or the fundamental problem that inflicts the system of governance today. You have beautifully identified it, and at the same time explained it also. Something that ails our system in terms of improper enforcement of accountability. I feel that there are two major reasons behind as to why we are not able to attune our bureaucracy, whether it is upward or downward. There are two reasons. The first reason is that we have this chalta hai attitude kind of a thing in bureaucracy. We don't have a proper reward and punishment system. If you see in the Western world, the moment they err, even in the slightest manner, they are punished so severely. But in our country, people get away with doing the biggest of things. And those people particularly who are with the government, because they know how to make use of the system to their benefit, they are neither punished for their acts of failure, and unfortunately the good deserving officers are not rewarded for that good work. So that is one problem. Our reward and punishment system is not appropriate, whether it is at the senior level or it is at the junior level. But yes, the seniors tend to get away more easily because they command more authority and more resources. The second thing is, sir, that since our childhood, our education system does not attune us to be professional. We are more of traditional in our thinking. If you compare with the best systems of governance, not only of the developed countries, but some developing countries also, South Africa, they are attuning the mind from day one. The child is taught that wrong means wrong, right means right. That demarcation is so clear from day one. They are taught that if you do this wrong, you will be punished in such a manner. So that person may not end up becoming a bureaucrat tomorrow, but he ends up becoming a responsible citizen. In our country, that does not happen. We again tend to get away by doing wrong things. So it is our education system which needs to parallelly be trained. We need to attune our mind to be more merit-oriented. We still have that concept of sifarish bazi. If I am, crossing the signal, I will, and if the police wala comes to me with a challan, I'll say, no, I know so and so body. That system is not there in progressive economies, in progressive societies. You cannot get away like that. And the police wala is also attuned कि हाँ ठीक है, किसी बड़े का अफसर का फोन कराएगा तो मैं भी इसको जाने दूंगा. So it is very mutual, both ways. Neither is the citizen behaving in a responsible manner, nor is is bureaucracy or the agents, the implementation machinery attuned to be merit-oriented. So I think that is my understanding. But you have beautifully, described the whole system in a nutshell. It's indeed a very difficult question to answer.
That's fine. No, I appreciate. I appreciate. That's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before we move on to the next question, ma'am, I have a comment from Professor Madhvi Mehta. She says, thanks for the insightful narration of your experience of managing the challenges in 4 different areas. I'm sure this will inspire our students to focus on the last person, as you indicated.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for your kind words.
Ma'am, I have a question from Anushka. Ma'am, as you talked about signed mafia, and in such cases, officers get pressurized by politicians and the mafia nexus. How did you face that? Along with strong resolution, any other support did you have or government protection? I'd like to know how you tackled such situations.
Yeah, so before I answer that, that is that's a thought that came to my mind this morning. The difficult situation between a permanent executive, which is a bureaucrat or an officer, and a political executive, which is a temporary person who changes every 5 years. So I was just amused with my own thought in this morning. This thought crossed my mind that, look, as officers, we are permanent people. We more or less are permanent. Nobody can really, throw us out of the system until unless, which is also a limitation of the system. But we are more or less more permanent than the political people. Yet, we are dependent on them. They come only for 5 years, but they will call all the shots in those 5 years. And, we will literally treat them like my baap. That, that man who will come for 5 years will decide my posting. So I need to, salute that man. I need to do his ji hazuri. Even though I'm much stronger, if I am able to value myself as a much stronger person, which unfortunately I'm not able to, because I value him or her much stronger than me. So I keep seeing कि वो है 5 साल के लिए, लेकिन वही मेरी position को decide करेगा. But actually, to come to terms with it, I am there who's actually maintaining the continuity, the stability of governance, and at the same time bringing development. But I'm not able to recognize my own strength. And when I'm not able to recognize my own strength, when individuals are not able of the system are not able to recognize their own individual strengths, the system as a whole becomes weak. What happens is that everybody becomes dependent on the political executive. Time and again, this thought troubles me that if we recognize our own strength and then lend support to our colleagues, to our, seniors, our juniors more particularly, then our system will become much stronger. And no matter who may come and go, it is us who are going to maintain the continuity of change. Now, coming to your question, you said if, the kind of problems that I faced. Yes, it was a very difficult time for me because, I'm being very upfront with all of you. I was just 9 months into service. It was I had not even completed 1 year. And at the night, I used to leave at about 2:30 in the night. And whole night, I used to be conducting raids. And I thought that I would be applauded for my work. But instead, what happened was that I was given a suspension order. And then I was given a charge sheet. And, there were certain people who were at the level of decision making who could not understand what I was doing. There was a lot of miscommunication. Though I do, remember, and I always thank those people in my prayers even today, that there were some seniors, some colleagues who stood by me very strongly. They supported me. But ultimately, because, in the beginning, I said that our individual strength is so weak that we are not able to lend support to each other. So at the end of the day, it was my own battle, which I had to face. But all of you, you're going to pass out and go into different assignments. And drawing from my experience, I would again want to tell you that be each other's support. Your own strength needs to be shared with your own people so that the whole system can become much stronger. Wherever you are, there may be somebody who may need you. You may not necessarily be able to help him or her. But if you can just stand by that person, it would make a lot of difference.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Before I move on to the next question from one of our students, I have a question from Ms. Sonal Zaveri, who is the Regional Coordinator, Gender and Equity Network South Asia, GENSA, and also a board member of COE South Asia. She asks, may I ask what role can evaluators play who are trained to understand the outputs and outcomes of accountability that need to be assessed, and how would you promote it in the government?
Yeah, Sonal ma'am, like, I said in the very beginning, the role of evaluators is very important. If we have this concept of monitoring trust. So unfortunately, the role of evaluators traditionally has been seen to come in the end when a program or a policy of the government has been implemented, as to how effective has it been in terms of, its financial usage of resources, in terms of administrative prudence, in terms of impact, in terms of outcome. But the actual role of evaluators should start from day one itself, in the form of a monitoring trust. If we have a monitoring trust from day one, in every policy and program, we would be clear. There is one line of people who are implementing, and there is one line of evaluators who are constantly checking whether the implementation is going in the desirable manner or not, whether the people for whom the program is intended is actually the result is it reaching out to them or not. See, results don't happen on day one, but the journey starts taking place from day one. So it is the check on the journey, and ultimately to the result and to the man on the last, literally the last edge itself. So that is how I perceive the role of evaluators in present times. It need not be construed as a negative role. It has to be a supportive role, wherein you are helping the implementers in the overall goal of last mile delivery.
I hope, Ms. Zaveri, the question has been answered. Okay, so I have a question from a student of ours, ma'am, called Shreyash. He says, good evening, ma'am. How did you persuade those elderly prerats that you spoke about?
Sorry, your voice got cracked a little in between. Please come up again.
I have a question from Shreyash, one of our students. He says, good evening, ma'am. How did you persuade those elderlies or prerats of the village to get on your side, as they were residing in the same society with the similar thought process? How did you go about persuading them?
Good evening, Shreyas. That's a very valid question, and I appreciate you for asking that. In fact, the prerats themselves made our job very easy. As the name suggests, prerats are somebody who are, intellectually more, have a higher, they have greater exposure, and they are more scientific in their thinking and in their approach. So, like I told you, the examples of prerats, they were school teachers, they were retired government clerks, they were respected people of the society with a certain educational background. So they were automatically attuned to what the government was trying to do. And in fact, we also were keen, it was like a win-win situation. We were also keen to pick up those prerats which were already committed to our goal. Because if they would not have been, then it would have made our task even more difficult. First to convince them, and then they to convince, the people in general. So we deliberately picked up those people who were already convinced with this model of toilet, that it is environment friendly, it is health promoting, so that they could clearly and with conviction, like I said towards the last slide, that with conviction they could convey the message that the toilets should not only be built, but they should be used. Otherwise, I'm sure had on a lighter note, if we would have had to convince them, then I'm sure the villagers would have actually, brainwashed them. It would have been very difficult. It would have actually been a reverse journey of execution then.
Thank you, ma'am. Next question is from Sanjeev. He says, I'm from Bihar, and in my locality, I find children being served khichdi for all days, even after the government stating that there is a menu that needs to be followed. So how do you think this ground implementation can be improved?
Yeah, so that's very important. They should not be served khichdi at all on all the days. There is a set menu. Maybe one day only is there for khichdi. On one day they are to be given eggs. On one day dal chawal, and on another day sabzi roti. So there is a very detailed menu in terms of the calorie that a child should be given, the nutrition that he or she must get in that particular food item daily basis. So that's a calorie count that is calculated when the food is cooked, and hence the need for a detailed menu. So if you feel that they are being served khichdi, it is absolutely wrong. Maybe somebody from your family or anybody who is there, in your place can approach the district administration at any level. It could be, the BDO, or it could be the SDM, it could be DM, ADM, anybody. and that person should be approached and they should be told about this particular thing that is happening. It's very unfortunate. It should not be happening at all.
Thank you, ma'am. I have a question from Ashish Jebraj. Very interesting question. He says, you said, ma'am, that the usage of public toilets ultimately reduces crimes. So how does that work exactly?
No, it's very easy. A lady would perhaps not ask this question, but for the benefit of the men here, I would say that in rural areas, what happens is that once the sun sets, let's say at about 7 or 8 o'clock, or past 9 o'clock, when it becomes pitch dark, and until the sunrise next day, which is perhaps at 5 o'clock or 5:30 or 6 o'clock, the ladies are not able to step out to go to the toilet to relieve themselves. Now, in rural areas where there are no toilets, you have to imagine a scenario, people going out in the open, into the fields to relieve themselves. Now, a woman cannot walk in the middle of all by herself. If you have seen this movie, Toilet Ek Prem Katha, it's a little 5-6-year-old movie now. I don't know whether you would have seen it or not. It is beautifully shown in that movie also, that ladies, what they do when it is going to be dawn, before that they go in groups of 4 to 5 with lotas in their hand, and they go to the fields to relieve themselves. And what happens is that they are teased. There are crimes against women happening at that time, especially if a particular lady goes all by herself. If she musters the courage, she's not able to hold on to herself for the entire night. If she walks in the middle of the night to relieve herself, she's often attacked. There are heinous crimes that happen. So toilets actually help reduce crimes, because you don't have to go to the fields. You simply use the toilet which is just next to your house, or perhaps within the boundary of your house. It's difficult to fathom for somebody who's been having an urban life. I too did not have this understanding until unless I was exposed to this kind of thing that I witnessed. You should actually watch that movie also. On a lighter note, it's deep in its analysis, and at the same time very hilarious in terms of its depiction of this social problem.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll just take a couple of more questions, let's say 3 questions, and then we'll conclude, ma'am. What you said about something that only women can associate with, the kind of situations. I have a question, similar question from Mayurika, a student of ours from the junior batch. Ma'am, has it been difficult to be at the position of power as a woman and then being undermined? How does it lower your morale, and how then ultimately you cope with that?
No, I don't think it. First question is whether it has been difficult or not. So I feel that as a woman officer, I've always had this advantage vis-a-vis the men officers, because as a woman officer, nobody likes to take panga with you, and they're all scared that one has to be sitting properly. One cannot just barge into a lady officer's room. So this is an advantage which all the lady officers have. So I feel that I was also a party to that advantage, and I never really faced any problem as such, because it also has a lot to do with my upbringing. My parents have never really brought me up in a fashion wherein I was made to understand this distinction between a girl and a boy. So for them, everybody is at par, and it is only merit which ultimately brings excellence to you in life. So that is the first part. And the second that you asked was, how did it feel to be undermined? So again, that undermining part had nothing to do with me being a woman. I never perhaps could connect it in that fashion, that, I have been tormented, so to say. I never felt it that way. I mean, I just took it as a challenge. And in fact, when I look back, I always say, I happily say that, there is, when you want to compress huge data, you make it into a zip format. And this is something which happened just after 9 months of my service, 8.5 months. I was not even 1 year into service. And this whole episode taught me so much, how to be brave, how to be strong, how to have that strength of character. it gave me so many lessons of life, which I would have learned perhaps after 10, 20, or maybe 15 years of service. So like a data gets compressed into a zip file, the learnings of my service got compressed into 9 months of my service. So that is how, I always look back. I don't really see myself being undermined. I feel that, I was perhaps very lucky to have gone through what I did, because I got to learn so much at the end of it.
Thank you, ma'am. I have a couple of questions from Professor Preeti Priya, Professor at IRMA. She starts with, thank you, ma'am, for an insightful talk. People like you are the sources of hope in the system. The standard understanding of bureaucracy is about being distant, rigid, and cold towards the communities. Your work suggests an opposite picture. Is it your own self, or also has there been something about the IAS training? Could you please share something about your training if there is a concerted effort to bring such a change in the orientation and attitude of civil service officers? This was number one. Secondly, I would also like to understand how easy it is to bring convergence or coordination between departments, like you talked about, Forest Department and your team.
Thank you, Preeti ma'am. Very, very valid questions, both of them. Coming to the first one, yes, indeed. The IAS training has been undergoing a lot of changes of late to make the officers more sensitive, more humane, more compassionate, less dispassionate, less neutral, and less wacky also. So we are, definitely given these trainings in a fashion that we tend to become, that human element behind a bureaucrat comes ahead of us, and we are able to appreciate the finer nuances, the genuine problems of people in general. So apart from the larger picture, we are also taught some very fine small trades. I'll give you an example that, two examples I'll give you. So first is that, we were taught that no matter whether a person comes to you for help, now his request may be legal or may not be, within the ambit of rules. But the very first principle, the very first rule is talk to him nicely. Try and understand his problem, because he doesn't know that, maybe what he needs is not within the ambit of rules. But if you, show him your genuine concern that, yes, you are willing to help, that makes a lot of difference. So at the end of the day, you may not even be able to help that person, but he goes off happy that he got a patient hearing from you. And communication is very important. And that is how, the training modules have been reoriented in the present times. And the second example was a negative example. Now, this was a positive one. The negative one was that generally bureaucrats, they are their image. When you think of a bureaucrat, the first picture that comes to your mind is an officer sitting on a table and looking down at the papers. You would never see a bureaucrat's face. Matlab, he or she would be so hard pressed of time that when a person would come to meet, he or she would continue to keep looking down. And that again is, sends a very wrong message. You have to give public hearings. This is a time which is devoted to the public completely. You should put away all papers, all files, give that person full attention. So I remember there used to be a senior of ours who used to never lift his head only. And I used to be amazed that, how is he able to do that? Hundreds of people used to come and meet him and go off in a period of, let's say, 2 hours, and he wouldn't lift his head. He would just say, So at times I used to find it funny, and at times I used to, find it very disappointing also as to, why is he not able to look up in front of the person who's coming to help? What, how much can we really help somebody? The first thing that we need to do is give him or her the due attention that he deserves. So training, of course, has been, revamped and continues to get revamped. And I'm sorry, once I start speaking, I just go with the flow. I forgot the second part of the question. Shivansh, if you could just repeat it.
Yes, ma'am. How easy it is to bring convergence and coordination between various departments?
Very important. I think this is like the professor who asked the question in the very beginning when he defined the lack of accountability. This aspect of convergence is again one of the most fundamental issues that we are facing today, and we have been facing since decades. Government departments tend to work in silos. They have no convergence at all, or they have minimum convergence. We again have not been taught from day one. I think this is where the training part of IAS officers or administrators in general lies. We should be taught to talk to each other, to talk to different departments, to our colleagues posted in different, for instance, there is agriculture department. I'll give you an example of agriculture. Now, when we talk about agriculture, we are talking about farmers producing more and more. But when we have too much of crop, we don't talk about exports. So naturally, when we talk about, having a plan for cultivation and the agriculture department is active, at the same time, it should be talking, to the commerce department, or the commerce department should be talking to the agriculture department that, look, if you envision so much of surplus, then it should be exported to so and so countries. And the farmers should then be given that message that this particular product can be exported so that they get the best possible price. So in my drive of afforestation, it was definitely very challenging to have convergence, but it is a lesson that gave me a lot of good results. That little effort which I had to put in to obtain convergence gave me huge results in terms of I never had a shortage of my saplings. In terms of labor, there was no problem for replenishment, for vehicles, transportation, anything, because everything was well planned and converged. And if we are able to do convergence with the different departments in small programs and policies of the government, I think we will be able to achieve much more than what we are achieving. And our results will not only be more in number, they will be more in terms of quality also. That quality aspect, I think, can come in only with the convergence.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We have a lot of questions that have gone unanswered, but with your permission, I'd like to compile all of them and maybe share them with you. And if we'd be grateful if you could ask them whenever, if you could answer them whenever it is convenient for you. Because we are facing there's paucity of time, so I now request Professor Shyam Singh to please express his vote of thanks. Professor Shyam Singh.
Thank you, Shivans, and thank you, madam, for very, not only motivating, definitely it was motivating, but I think it's full of content. I think you offered, everything for all stakeholders, academics and students like me. The concept of converting output into results, and they are pretty much different from numbers. When you say ODF, being ODF or getting up, area ODF is the result, not the number of toilets. Or in this case of the plantation, the 80% survival rate is the results, not the 7 lakh, the saplings that were planned to. But you also, for action people, those are in the action arena, you said that, last is the first. I think that was for them. And believe me, you also did a bit of frank talking when you were actually discussing, the governance issue, particularly the politicians and officers. So being a change agent, I think, was the message for public servants as well. So in totality, I think it was a very nice lecture. I hope that we continue, associated with you and our students get benefited. Thank you very much for taking time from your busy schedule and spending some time with us in this evening. Thank you very much. I thank my faculty colleagues who really took time and participated here, Professor Salinda, Professor Preeti, Professor Madhvi, Professor Sudhir Sinha, and I saw a couple of more names. Thank you very much, sirs and madam, to really be part of this talk. I thank some of the colleagues who are out, outside from IRMA. I mean, Dr. Sonal Zaveri is a very trained and respected evaluator, and she asks questions regarding evaluation. Some of the colleagues from Evaluation Community of India. Thank you very much. And at the end, my dear students, irrespective of the exam that are going to really take off a day after, I think they took time, came here, and I hope they actually learned a lot. So thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Professor Shyam Singh. I'm indebted to you for organizing this lecture today, and to all the respected faculty members for being so soft and compassionate towards my limited experiences of my just very few years of service. And to all the dear students today who've been very patiently listening to whatever has been discussed today. I feel very happy after having interacted with each one of you, and I hope that we can carry forward this journey in some way or the other in times to come. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you everyone for participating. Thank you.